In a week and a half, Jews all over the world will gather to observe Passover, to remember the foundations of the Israelite community in redemption from slavery. We will gather at dinner tables and before the meal, tell the story of liberation from slavery in Egypt over 3,000 years ago with song, story, questions, and symbolic foods. Foods such as horseradish to symbolize the bitterness of slavery, salt water symbolizing the tears of the slaves, charoset, a mud-like mixture of apples, cinnamon, nuts, and wine, symbolizing the mortar the Israelites used in Pharaoh's building projects. The passages you just saw in the slides are from the Haggadah, the book we use to tell the story. There are hundreds of Haggadot with different artwork, commentary, and translations of the text. Haggadah means telling. One of the slides held this text. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. Had not the Holy One, praised be the One, delivered our people from Egypt, then we, our children, and our children's children would still be enslaved. Therefore, even if all of us were wise, all of us people of understanding, all of us learned in Torah, it would still be our obligation to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Moreover, whoever searches deeply into its meaning is considered praiseworthy. Passover is observed by more Jews than any other occasion on the Jewish calendar. All Jews have this reminder of our beginnings in slavery and oppression. What is also true is that every Shabbat, every Sabbath, and every festival throughout the year, we include a declaration of the sanctity of the day over wine, our symbol of joy. And this declaration, which actually you heard that blessing during the slides, includes the words Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, a reminder of the Exodus from Egypt. That is, if you were still a slave in Egypt or anywhere, you would not have a day of rest. You would not be celebrating festivals. Redemption in Judaism is an event that happened to our ancestors over 3,000 years ago, and as for our ancestors, for us. And if you happen to do more as a Jew than observe festive occasions around the dinner table, you are reminded of the Exodus, the redemption from slavery twice every single day in our morning worship and in our evening worship, in which we acknowledge you rescued us from Egypt and redeemed us from the house of bondage. What do we do with this redemption? Why are we reminded of it constantly? First off, to be aware of our humble roots and grateful for our freedom, and secondly, to feel obligated to serve God in return. And finally, telling the story of our historic roots as an oppressed people, including it in our worship every day, opens our hearts to the suffering of others and compels us to act to alleviate their suffering. The result is meant to be that we act to redeem others from oppression, that we uphold the dignity and take responsibility for the plight of the powerless. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, teaches us, you shall not pervert the justice due to the stranger or to the fatherless, nor take the widow's garment as pledge, but you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and God redeemed you from there. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. When you reap the harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in your field, do not go back to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and the widow. Why? You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. That's from Deuteronomy chapter 24 and also from Deuteronomy chapter 16 regarding celebration of festive occasions. You shall rejoice before God, you, your children, your servants, and the Levite who is within your gates, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are in the midst of you, in the place which God will choose to cause God's name to dwell there. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and you shall observe and do these statutes. That is, you are to take those below the poverty line with you on your festival pilgrimage. In one of the Passover slides was the text, "This is the bread of affliction that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt." This is said holding up matzah, unleavened bread, as a reminder of our suffering, and it's followed immediately by the words, "Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate Passover with us." The reminder of our suffering leads necessarily to action to alleviate others' sufferings. While still at Mount Sinai, immediately after witnessing and hearing the 10 Commandments, more rules, commandments, obligations came down through Moses, including these two. You shall not wrong the stranger, neither shall you oppress them, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And you shall not oppress the stranger, for you know what it feels like to be a stranger, seeing as you yourselves were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Having experienced oppression, carrying the trauma of that recent oppression within, you know how it feels to be a resident who does not have full status, who is not a citizen. You know what not to do. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of Great Britain, may his memory be for a blessing, teaches us, empathy surely extends to acquaintances, co-workers, and loved ones as well. It is invoked specifically concerning strangers because empathy is strongest in groups where people identify with each other. Your family, your congregation, your co-workers, your ethnic group, your gender identity. The stronger the bond within a group, the sharper the suspicion and fear of those outside the group. These commands, given shortly after the Exodus, implicit in them is that radical idea that care for the stranger is why the Israelites had to experience exile and slavery before they could enter the promised land and build their own society and state. You will not succeed in caring for the stranger implies God until you yourselves know in your very bones and sinews what it feels like to be a stranger, and lest you forget, I have already commanded you to remind yourselves and your children of the taste of affliction and bitterness every year on Passover. Those who forget what it feels like a stranger eventually come to oppress strangers. And if the children of Abraham oppress strangers, why did I make them my covenantal partners? How do you empathize with a stranger? By putting yourself in their shoes. That's what the rabbi in the story I told did for the wealthy man who had no idea what it meant to be cold. What these commandments in the Torah do, what Passover rituals do, they promote empathy by reminding us of, if not our recent, then our historic vulnerability. Yes, you can empathize with someone needing knee replacement surgery if you've gone through the ordeal. But for those whose trials are beyond your experience, you can reach back. For instance, you can draw on the stories of how your grandparents or great-grandparents struggled during the depression, to have a sense of how hard it is for those you see coming to the food pantry or looking for a myriad of resources in the Compassion for Campers room at the homeless gathering on Fridays. Even though you've always lived in your hometown, you can draw on the stories of your ancestors being displaced from their homes in this land or coming to this country to escape persecution or economic hardship elsewhere. Leviticus 19, verses 33 to 34 tell us, "If a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not wrong them. The strangers that dwell with you shall be to you as the citizens among you, and you shall love them as yourself, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt." Drawing on our own current or historic vulnerabilities can be our impetus to ask ourselves, how can I help? When confronted by need in others with whom you think you have nothing in common. This is why at Passover we recite, "Therefore, even if all of us were wise, all of us people of understanding, all of us learned in Torah, it would still be our obligation to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Moreover, whoever searches deeply into its meaning is considered praiseworthy."